Good evening, my name is Pierfilippo, and I'll be presenting the Dopamine Trap. A few weeks ago, as I was getting seated in my Spanish class, our teacher was going through the protocol of collecting our phones before the beginning. As she was doing so, she felt the need to go on a small tangent about why what she was doing was actually important. Now, I'll be honest, I'd have heard this explanation probably a million times already. I wasn't even really listening, but she asked a very compelling question that I want you to take a few seconds to reflect on as well. How much time during the day are you actually spending away from the screen? Now, when I thought about this question myself, I came to the realization that my answer was practically none. I'm glued to some form of a screen every day for all my awake hours. Now, screens have seeped into almost every single aspect of our day-to-day lives, and as history has come to teach us, you can't really fight change. Now, while everyone knows that living in the digital world is not exactly the best for you, not everyone is fully aware of the effects that living in this world can actually have on you. See, the infamous example that I'm getting at here is social media. Social media can have a myriad of detrimental psychological effects on someone, but the one I'm going to focus on today is one that's not quite getting the attention that it deserves despite its significance. Social media's impact on our dopamine receptors. See, with time, social media has become an inescapable part of our lives and practically an alternative to reality for many people. Most importantly, for Gen Z. I would like to bring your attention to this graph here. As you can see, teenagers in the United States spend an average of 4.8 hours daily just on social media. Now, this is not a very positive statistic, but it's safe to say that I'm not contributing because this is a bar graph of my daily time spent on Instagram a few weeks ago. As you can see, I spent more than 24 hours in this week, more than one full day this week on Instagram alone, just mindlessly scrolling. But the time that we spend on social media is not all spent keeping in touch with people or using it as a communication tool. It's actually mostly spent on filling in spare time. It is a percentage of time that is actually actively growing, and it is represented by a practice that we now know today as doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is loosely defined as the excessive use of social media to consume what is known as short-form content. Now, many of you are looking pretty confused right now, so I'll give you a few examples. These are the kind of videos that you might stumble into if you open TikTok nowadays. As you can see, these videos are littered with several different stimuli so as to keep the viewer entertained for as long as humanly possible, which unfortunately works very well. This is also known as sludge content, and it is one of the main reasons why many people, including myself, have reported a sharp drop in attention spans over the past few years. Unfortunately, escaping this endless loop of gratification can be very, very hard for many people. Dr. Anna Lembke, the chief of Stanford University's addiction clinic, has talked about the subject extensively in her book, Dopamine Nation. Dopamine is defined as the brain's reward chemical, a neurotransmitter which goes off whenever we do something fun, something pleasurable, something that we look forward to. But unfortunately, it is also heavily linked to dependency and addiction. In fact, Dr. Lemke's classification of social media as an addiction is because, just like any other addiction, people addicted to social media are reliant upon it to release a certain amount of dopamine. Unfortunately, the dopamine release that we have so craved throughout history is nowadays just a tap away. Dr. Lemke explains that the abundant release of dopamine that we go through actually leads to a deficit in our brain which shifts the baseline much lower than it should be, leading to us actually releasing less of the chemical throughout the day because of our reliance on the stimulant of social media. Now, the scariest part about all this is that this is not all speculation. It's actually been clinically proven on several occasions. Researchers at Seoul National University actually found that men with internet addictions had a much lower dopamine receptor availability than men without. Psychologists at Radboud University in the Netherlands came to the same conclusion, specifically stating that a higher proportion of social app interactions correlates with lower dopamine synthesis capacity in the bilateral putamen. An easier way to visualize this is right here. So, what can we do about all this? You see, I strongly believe that, as with any other addiction, the main way of combating it should be through self-awareness. And hopefully this presentation has helped. Becoming aware of your screen time can be a great way to develop a consciousness of the way your time is spent on social media. A trick that I want to teach you today is next time you're just mindlessly scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, whatever social media it is that you might use, try to remember just the last 2 videos you watched, because chances are you can't. And it's a great way to remind yourself of just the low value of time that you were spending on social media. Now, I'd like to close off this presentation with a graph that I saw in another TED Talk a few years ago called the battle for your time. Here is a visual representation of the gravity of our situation today. There's so much to unpack in this graph, but I'd like to just give you a few seconds to try to soak it in as much as possible. All good? Thank you for listening.